A few days before Christmas, Will Aytonton decided to resign from his company's editor position in New York and return home. He wanted to spend the rest of his life focusing on his writing and family. Everyone bid farewell to Will with tears in their eyes because not everyone is lucky enough to have a friend like Will. Mrs. Greeley gave him a construction company's business card as a parting gift. As soon as he arrived in his small hometown by train, Heather dropped him off at his new house. There, Will's eyes fell on the love of his life, his wife Libby, who was standing outside the door. After a long time apart, Will couldn't help but be playful upon seeing his wife again. Their two daughters are Dee Dee and Trish. Reunited with his loved ones, Will was overwhelmed with happiness. Looking at his children's faces, he told himself he had made the right decision. Will was working on a novel. When the time came, Libby would be the first to read it. The flower vase on the dinner table had arrived just that morning. Libby thought Will had sent it, but Will said, "I didn't send it. Maybe a fan sent it as a gift." After so long, being close to each other again, they were immersed in love, just as Will had dreamed of. The next morning, while working in the garden, Will noticed a neighbor named Jack glaring at him with irritation. Jack had come to pick up his daughter, Chloe. He didn't want their daughter to stay with his ex-wife, and, after the divorce, legal proceedings were ongoing regarding that matter. However, the court was in favor of Anne, which was Jack's biggest frustration. In the afternoon, Will sat down to work on his novel. The writing was slowly progressing. While painting a room, Libby noticed markings on the wall measuring children's height. It was made by the house's previous owners. At night, while Will was busy writing, the kids suddenly ran to him in fear, saying they saw someone outside the window. Will went to check but found no one. Actually, the children had mistaken the dark shadow of a tree for a person. The next morning, when Will came into the garden, he saw footprints in the snow outside the window and grew worried. Someone had really been there last night. The footprints led straight to Libby's window. Was someone watching them? Though the question arose in his mind, Will didn't tell anyone about it. Late that night, after hearing some unclear noises, Will came to the basement and saw a few young people doing a séance, planchette. As soon as they saw him, everyone tried to flee, but one girl fell, and Will caught her. When Will questioned the girl, she said they thought no one lived in that house. And how could anyone? People said it was a haunted house. Because 5 years ago, on a cold April night, the owner of this house had killed his entire family. One of the boys in the group then said, "He's back." Hearing that, Will became anxious, and they all ran away. This meant these kids were the ones who peeked through the window the previous night. Will didn't tell Libby anything about it and went to the police the next day to find out more about the house. But the police tried to ignore the matter as much as possible. They only said that on that night, except for the homeowner Peter, the entire family was wiped out. When Will tried to learn what happened to Peter afterward, the police didn't offer any help. Upon returning home, he found the children sitting on Libby's lap in fear. They had overheard the neighbor's daughter talking about the deaths that occurred in this house. Will immediately went to Anne's house. Chloe opened the door. Without saying anything, she called Anne. Will explained that he had young children and didn't want them to hear anything about past incidents. So he asked Anne to be careful about what was said. Anne looked at him silently, as if she wanted to say something. There was a strange silence in her eyes. That midnight, when Libby didn't find Will beside her, she went to the basement and saw Will trying to cover up some writings on the wall with paint. Libby was shocked to see the condition of the basement. Those young people had left several newspaper clippings about the past events there. Seeing Peter's name on the wall, Libby asked Will everything, and upon learning the truth, she didn't want to stay in the house anymore. To calm Libby, Will suggested calling a priest. But Libby softly said, "Maybe I'm overthinking. This is our home. We'll be happy here together." Just then, Libby saw someone dressed in a black suit standing behind the trees in the garden. Will chased after him, but the man somehow escaped. But who was he? What were his intentions? Everything remained a mystery. One day, the children suddenly went missing in the house. After searching everywhere, they were found playing together in a hidden spot inside a room. Will realized that the previous family's children must have played there. In 2 books found in that spot, the names Catherine and Beatrice were written, meaning the previous family also had 2 daughters, and the height markings by the stairs matched their names. This incident deeply worried Will. He started reviewing the newspaper clippings and film reels. Such a terrible incident had happened in this house, yet none of the neighbors ever warned them about the house's history. And maybe that's why they got the house so cheaply. From the evidence, Will found out that Peter had shot his younger daughter in the back. Both Will and Libby were horrified by the severity of the events that had occurred. The very next day after meeting Will for the first time, Anne brings food for him to deepen their friendship. But when Will asks her about Peter, Anne suddenly hurries away without answering. When Will asks Libby why she hasn't come downstairs, Libby shows him 3 large bullet holes on the wall, symbolizing the horror of 3 deaths. That night, as the two of them go through the newspaper clippings, they find more information about Peter. After that tragic night, he was admitted to a mental hospital named Green Haven. So, the next day, Will goes to the mental hospital in the city where Peter was kept. At the reception, he's told to wait to meet Peter. But secretly, Will goes to room 308 and meets the patient there, only to be shocked seeing a photo of Peter's wife and 2 children that looks just like his own family. Just then, seeing a man enter the room, Will attacks him. The man introduces himself and says he's not Peter, his name is Martin. He explains that Peter left the facility long ago. Will returns home, unsure what to tell Libby. If Peter is no longer in the hospital, maybe he's watching them now. Maybe the children aren't safe anymore. Suddenly, hearing a car outside, Will rushes out and sees a man escaping in a car. When the police arrive at the scene, Will shows them the photo found in Peter's room and demands they arrest him. From a distance, and silently watches the entire incident. She wants to say something, but remains quiet. As the police leave without helping, Will starts to lose faith in the system. Why aren't they helping? The next day, desperate for answers, Will meets the head doctor of Green Haven, Dr. McLean, and asks for all the information regarding Peter. Dr. McLean shows Will a video from the day Peter was first brought in. Peter was extremely violent. Noticing a deep scar on the back of Peter's head, Will asks about it. McLean explains that on the night of the incident, Peter's wife shot him in the head while trying to save herself. The bullet grazed his head, barely missing. After arriving at the facility, Peter once tried to escape. He claimed he wanted to kill the man who murdered his family. While watching the escape footage, Will notices and was present at the hospital during that time. This confirms that and knew everything from the beginning. Will's suspicion turns out to be entirely correct. But an even bigger shock was waiting. After some time, Peter refuses to be called Peter anymore. He says he could never hurt his family. He even removed his name from the hospital's records and chose a new identity. That new name? Will Atenton. At that moment, Dr. McLean shows Will a 5-year-old surveillance footage. In it, Peter is none other than Will himself. This is why the police didn't help him, because Will is Peter. But how could that be possible? Is what Will seeing even real? He's left speechless. If he accepts this truth, then it means his family no longer exists, they died 5 years ago. Will angrily calls Libby. She answers. So is that also a hallucination? On the way back, it is revealed that the editor's office Will was shown leaving at the beginning of the story was actually Green Haven, and all his colleagues were actually patients at the facility. This is why they all knew Will and even asked about his novel. But things get even stranger after Will returns home. The house he had lived in just hours ago now looks abandoned, like no one had set foot in it for years. Then where are Libby and the kids? Finding the door locked, Will enters through the basement's outer door and sees no one inside. It becomes clear, Libby and the children died 5 years ago. Everything since then had been part of Will's mental illness, or more precisely, hallucination. Seeing the flower vase on the table shakes him to the core. He starts crying like a madman. He hides his half-written novel inside the stairs, lights the candles on the table, and from the next room, Libby appears. The sounds of the children playing pull him back into his memories. Now, he and Libby sit together. As Libby places her hand on his forehead, she realizes Will has a high fever. With tears in his voice, Will says, "They're saying none of you are real. You all died 5 years ago. And it was my fault." Libby doesn't believe him. Will brings his elder daughter and asks her in front of the height marker, "What's your real name?" She replies, "Trish." Then he brings the younger daughter, Dee, whose real name is Catherine. The pain in Will's chest grows unbearable. He realizes that every person he loved standing in front of him isn't real, but a creation of his mind. Libby, whose real name was Elizabeth, knows the truth too, but says nothing. She wants to keep Will happy. She puts the children to sleep and quietly applies cold compresses on Will's forehead to bring down his fever. Will slowly fades into a strange trance-like state. Is this all just a dream? At midnight, he wakes up to Libby's scream. The kids are struggling to breathe. According to Libby, they have a high fever. But Will knows the truth. He hugs Trish, seeing a bullet wound on her chest and shoulder. The bullet had gone right through her body. Dee also has a gunshot wound on her back. Will tries to make Libby see reality, but Libby refuses to accept it. Both their beautiful children die in an instant. That heartbreaking night, the trauma begins to destroy Will from the inside. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door. Will opens it and sees the police. They escort him out and lock the entire house. It is illegal for anyone to stay in an abandoned house like this. Seeing his state, and comes forward and gently asks, "Do you really see them?" Will points to the window upstairs and says, "Look, Libby is still watching me." And calmly replies, "There's no one there. Your family now rests in their graves." Will spend some time sitting under a tree. Around midnight, when he tries to re-enter the house, he finds someone already inside. In the darkness, the man's face isn't visible. But he confesses, he had been watching Will all this time. The next morning, when Will goes to meet Anne, she invites him into her house for the first time. Will asks her, what really happened that night? And replies that she didn't witness it with her own eyes. Will then asks why and went to Green Haven. And says Libby was her best friend. She used to play with her 2 children every day. That day, when Anne met Will for the first time and he introduced himself as Will, she almost said, "Peter," but held back. She didn't want to remind him of the past. Did Will really kill them? Anne doesn't answer, but she feels that he couldn't have done it. Just then, Chloe walks in and tells Will, "I left the flower vase in the house. I miss my 2 friends very much. Tell me, do you really see them?" Will is speechless, lost in a strange emptiness. Since Will hadn't taken a bath for days, Anne asks him to freshen up while she goes to town with her daughter for some shopping. But Will finds no peace. Every time he closes his eyes, flashbacks of that tragic night haunt him. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rings. When he comes downstairs, he finds Jack at the door. Seeing Will in the house, Jack storms off angrily with his daughter. Will realizes that his presence is causing conflict in this family. It's better he doesn't stay here. Before leaving, Anne gives him a card of Dr. Greeley and asks him to visit him. He once treated Will. Accordingly, Will meets Dr. Greeley, and his first question is, "Why did Libby leave me?" Greeley replies that there wasn't any strong evidence about the incident, but what was found was enough to hold Will accountable. Will says, "I'm still searching for my family's killer. And if it turns out to be me, I'll end myself." The doctor says, "If you accept that you're responsible, I promise I'll cure you and free you from this pain." But Will leaves without saying anything. He returns to his own house. Breaking the glass on the door, he enters and starts reminiscing. Then he sees Libby. The children are still waiting for him. Will puts them to bed and asks Libby, what really happened that night? But she refuses to say anything. What does Libby want? Why did she shoot him? As Will touches the back of his head and feels the bullet wound, Libby breaks into tears. What really happened that night? Suddenly, there's a knock at the door, and has arrived. Will again pleads with Anne for the truth. But Anne insists on one thing, Will must say his final goodbye to his family. Otherwise, their souls will never be freed. Libby loved him deeply. But Will should not have come back to this house. Will is stunned. He thinks all of this is just a delusion in his mind. Then who is Anne talking about? As Anne asks Will to leave, he repeatedly asks how Libby died. And with Libby standing beside him, her memories transport them back to 5 years ago? That night, the children ran downstairs after hearing footsteps, expecting to see their father. But instead of their father, it was Boyce, a hired killer. His gun was pointed at the 2 little girls. Peter, Will, was on the phone, and sensing something was wrong, he rushed back home. But just then, the gunshots rang out. The 2 innocent girls were killed. Libby was shot too. Peter pounced on Boyce, and during the struggle, Libby picked up the gun and shot at Boyce, but the bullet hit Peter in the head. Boyce then killed Libby and escaped. The bullet had just grazed Peter's skull, so he survived, but lost all his memories. At that point, Jack arrived with Boyce and attacked Peter. Jack took control over Anne, while Boyce drugged Peter and dragged him to the basement. And this is where the biggest twist is revealed. 5 years ago, Jack had hired Boyce to kill Anne, because he suspected she was having an affair. Jack wanted to get rid of her and take full custody of Chloe. But that night, Boyce mistakenly entered Peter's house instead of Anne's, and wiped out an innocent family. Back to the present, Jack now keeps Peter locked in the basement and plans to kill him along with, and suddenly, Jack shoots Boyce. Why? Because Boyce had been blackmailing Jack for the last 5 years. And more than that, Boyce was the one who actually killed the 2 kids. So he had no right to live. Jack ties up Anne and tries to stage everything to make it look like mentally unstable Peter killed Anne and then took his own life. He spreads gasoline around the house to burn everything down. But at that moment, Libby appears and shocks Jack. She helps Peter regain consciousness and confuses Jack completely. The truth finally comes out, Peter wasn't mentally ill. Because the real spirits of Libby and their daughters still haunted that house. Before Jack could process this supernatural event, Peter hits him and rescues Anne just in time. And Boyce, who was still alive, finishes the job. He pours gasoline on the basement stairs and kills Jack. Within moments, the entire house is engulfed in flames. But Peter doesn't stop. Driven by love, he runs back inside. He still believes his family is waiting for him. Standing near the stairs, Libby smiles peacefully. Peter tells her, "I don't want to lose you." Tears fall from Libby's eyes. The kids run to their father to see him one last time. They say, "We don't want to lose you either, but everything has its time. Even though we're just puppets in fate's hands, love never loses." Libby looks at him one last time, lost in all their memories. Throughout her life, Peter stood beside her like a shadow, even after death. And in the blazing flames, Peter's family disappears. But before escaping, Peter doesn't forget to take his hidden novel manuscript from under the stairs. By the time the police and firefighters arrive, everything is already destroyed. Before anyone can react, Peter walks away from everything, into a new world. Time passes. Peter Ward's novel receives national acclaim. There is no longer any doubt about that name. In bookstores, his novel stands proudly on the country's #1 bestsellers list. And the name of that novel? Dream House. The same story we just witnessed through this entire video.